Well, why is 8,000 days so important is that before, life expectancy was 69 to 73, 74. Now the likelihood of everybody that's on earth today is going to live into their 80s.
Because when you notice the patterns of your life, that's when you can actually change those patterns.
As we move into the exploring phase, that fourth phase, there's still a recreation.
To change your attitude, you have to continue to build your talents and your skills.
Well, welcome everybody. I am very excited to be here with Craig Cushman, who's an entrepreneur, extremely talented trainer, has worked in the self-improvement business and in the digital business for most of his career. He's educated people. He's worked in the education business as well, because leadership skills are leadership skills, and he's a great leader. I've asked him to come and share some of his experience based on this topic. And the topic we're going to share today, and the topic we're going to discuss today, is based on Dr. Coughlin's 8,000 days. He is actually the director of the MIT Age Lab, and I'm really excited to talk about it because it's a wonderful concept of organizing time periods in people's lives. He actually calls it the 4 8,000-day phases. I would call it the 4 quarters of life. Being a football coach and quarterback, it's real easy to think through those terms. As a matter of fact, I can't tell you how many times when people have turned 40, 45, they say, I'm on the second half of life. Well, you could then relate based on this concept. And the way that it's organized is the first 8,000 days is what they call the learning phase. And that means you're born, you go to school and you learn, and then you start to develop some skills, and you go to college and you try to find out who you are and what you're all about. And then the next 8,000 days is from age 22 to 44. And that's called the growing phase. And what does that mean? It means you're now starting your career. You're going to find a person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. You might even be developing a relationship that turns into being parents and raising children, buying your own home, being in the communities or the cities that you're going to grow up in and continue in your career at. That's called the growing phase. And then the second half of life comes on in, and that's called the maturing phase. And that's actually from 44 to 66, those next 8,000 days. That's actually when now you're in kind of the prime of your career. And what's interesting about that next phase is you've had enough experience to have some victories, but you've also had enough experience to have some pain. You've probably made some mistakes, and you might be even feeling some of the consequences of those mistakes. But that 44 to 66 is usually when you're earning the most money. It's also when you have the highest level of responsibility. Kids are in college, and you probably are in a situation where there might be some life transitions, empty nesters. You actually are now starting maybe even welcoming in grandkids. That phase is called the maturing phase. And then the last 8,000 days is what Dr. Coughlin calls the exploring phase. You're exploring what's the next phase of life. Now you don't have a lot of limitations, maybe other than finances or health, because you should have some more time. You should have ability to do the things you want to do when you'd like to do them if you did things correctly. But you might be in a situation where, how do I explore this new phase of life when I don't have a job and I don't have a career, or I don't even have some of my friends who may have passed? That exploring part is what he considers that great expectation of exploring. He breaks it down into 4 phases. We're going to talk more about that. But I wanted to frame it for you so that you understand is to be the CEO of your own life means different things in each of these phases, because it's your responsibility and your accountability to actually experience those in a way that benefits and moves your life forward, that you can then magnetize your life so that you can bring in the good things that matter and repel the things that don't. And it defines the principles in which you live your life. And that's what this podcast is designed to do, is to help you frame that, think about these things, improve skill sets, improve associations, and most of all, improve your life. So as we dive into it, Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I love this conversation. It's really, really important. There's a lot of comfort that we can take when we organize our thinking around an idea that puts direction and clarity to our lives. Awareness is an incredible power. When we live unaware and random, then things can feel out of control. And I think there are really five five things that most of us are needing, wanting in what we do. We like security, we like safety, we like stability, we like recognition and love. Those are sort of the big five that everybody drives for. And so this kind of a conversation actually starts to put a wrap around the stability part of things. Like, how do we control our lives so that we can get this other one around security, which is that peace of mind. And peace of mind is elusive in many ways. And these kind of conversations actually lead us to that. And so I appreciate being a part of this conversation.
No, you bet. And it's a pleasure. And can you just tell everybody a little bit about your background? Because you've actually done a lot of things, and you've done a lot of things really well. You've touched a lot of people's lives and helped shape a lot of people's lives. So if you would mind, please.
Yeah. My background, I've been a salesperson my whole life. I love the art and science of sales. I love the art and science of helping others. And I had to learn the skills of persuasion and all of that. And people tend to resist the idea of sales because the story goes that everybody loves to buy, but nobody likes to be sold. But the truth is, nothing happens if there isn't somebody sharing information and educating you and guiding you to make your decisions. So everything is sales, and it requires the right energy, the right belief system, and it does require a level of skill. So I've spent my career really mastering the skills of selling, but then also mastering the training of the skills of selling, because real success comes with your ability to create rules, enforce those rules, build a team, help that team enforce the rules, help that team to sell, help that team learn how to learn how to teach, and process and optimize the systems that they're in. So I've spent my career in and around that, and that led me to an education and consulting environment. So I spent some time working with Dr. Stephen Covey, with his organization. I've worked with Robert Kiyosaki. I've worked with Steve Farber, a number of notable authors throughout my life and time. And I've had the opportunity to be a part of some of the biggest companies in the world. I've had senior roles in organizations upward of 1 million people around it, and so I've had some really unique and cool opportunities to influence, instruct, guide, inspire, encourage, and educate. And as I was doing that, of course, the greatest education you get is preparing to educate other people. And so I've had enormous opportunities to tap into what I have a passion for, and something that I'm reasonably good at, and that holds value for others. So that's a little nutshell of my career.
Well, as you can see, Craig is actually very, very experienced in terms of helping leaders and people learn the skills that make people successful. One of them, matter of fact, I know you and I share this in common, is reading a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. And ironically, they talk about influencing people as a way of telling stories, sharing information that actually adds influence to doing something in their life. Something that, rather than staying there and doing nothing, is actually in movement. And ironically, I have a philosophy that says it's easier to steer a moving car than a parked car. And it's the same thing, is to get people moving along those fashions. One last thing before we dive into this next section of the growing part is I find it very interesting that sales and sales ability and influencing is in everything, including my kids.
Yeah.
They say, I've never met a kid that says, do I have to brush my teeth? And the answer is yes, because if you don't, your teeth are going to rot, your breath's going to stink, and no one's going to really like you. And it's basically not because they don't like you, it's because they can't stand the smell that's coming from you. And the reality is there's a oral hygiene of it, there's a health issue, etc. But it's how parents communicate that to whether they like it, they hate it, and then maybe just ignore it. And that's an art of selling. And it goes into everything, including to how you communicate with your wife, and you communicate with the public, and how you communicate with your friends, how you communicate with your clients. That level of influence and sales ability is critical. And that's what we're doing here, is to talk about those principles that matter to have your life become the life you've always dreamed it could be, that you could design it. But the reality is, it's really, they have to sometimes sell themselves to do those things.
100%. Because there's another side to what you just said too, which is, and the term is habituation. Like, what have you been given as rituals and habits throughout your life? And they can be really positive, like brushing your teeth. That's a really positive one. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get feedback. But there's also negative habituation. There's also negative thoughts, negative ideas, things that have been fed to you throughout your life that you might have to deprogram and reprogram. So taking control of your life, taking control of all the things in your life, is played out predominantly between your ears, and it is reprogramming, recalibrating those habits that you know lead to success, that you've observed in other people, and that you actually stop and review within yourself. William Wordsworth was a poet in the 1800s, and he said something really interesting in a poem that he had written, and it was, habits rule the unreflecting herd. And there's a long-term implication of that, because there are some habits that are intergenerationally driven down to you. There's some that could be hundreds of years old in your life, that if you don't stop and reflect on those, you'll just carry through. And the whole idea that Wordsworth was saying is that you are like a cow in the field if you don't stop and reflect on your habits. So I think this conversation is an enormous one, because at any given point, we're given the opportunity to stop, reflect, reinvent, and create new habits. It's not easy though, because it's something that we have a tendency to resist, but that's where we have to rise through. That's the thing that we have to break through.
So let's talk about that growing phase. So that's the second 8,000 days that Dr. Coughlin talks about, age 22 to 44. And it's usually when you're starting your career, or starting your new profession, or what I'll call turning the chapter of, I'm done with my adolescence, I'm done with college, I'm done with this phase of my life, and I'm moving now into adulting, so to speak. Yeah, I'm moving into this.
I know a lot of old guys that are still stuck there.
I think we know the same people.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
I hear you. I find it interesting because in my life, it's really easy to try to follow your passion, because you say, I want to do the things that I like to do, rather than choosing the things that you're good at doing. Because the things that add most value, that you can add most value to other people, are doing the things that you're really good at doing. And you could look at anybody in life. I mean, for example, in this podcast, we've chosen two people that are really good at producing and editing and the creative part of this. They're really good at it. And whether they love it to the extent where they would love to do it as a hobby, or that they're so good at it that it becomes their passion in life because they can add the most value to people. And I think sometimes in that growing phase is trying to find out, what am I really good at? Mm-hmm. And trying to find out, do I like doing this to the point where I can make it a lifelong journey? Or do I do what I'm really good at and practice what I love to do until I get really good at it so I can add value? And that seems to be the time when you can do it, when you're young, at least at the onset, and then choosing the kind of your path. What advice would you give to a person that's that 22 to 44, they're just in this phase? Or more importantly, what are the things, if you reflect back on your life, that you'd like to share to say, hey, these are some things that I would either do differently or I would do more of?
Yeah, there's a concept, there's a whole book written on the concept of flow. And flow is this optimal zone that we live in. And it's somewhere between being not too hard, where you just resist doing it, or being too easy, where you just sort of like burn out on it. But it's somewhere in this channel that is it's there. And getting to flow is one of those things that it's the combination of something you're good at. So I agree with you that something you're naturally good at, have some talents to do, and you have mastery over. But it also has to make you money, So, and it will only make you money typically if it's got some value to other people, right? So, and then there's a third component, which is passion. There's great wealth in passion, because passion does not allow you to be dissuaded. It gives you an energy of relentlessness. And so if you can be relentlessly passionate, and build your skill at what you do, and that skill makes you money because it adds value to other people, now you've hit this trifecta, where in the middle of that is your flow zone, and you can wake up with relentless energy to just do what you do. So I think there was a moment in time for me in the, I was in my 30s where I read this book that said, the book was called Leadership from the Inside Out by a guy named Kevin Cushman. And I only state that because I hold that book sacred. It wasn't really the book. It was the book that happened to facilitate a download of spiritual intelligence upon me that awakened something inside of me. And I still have that book on my shelf, and I have the moment when I wrote inside the cover of it, and I dated it. It was I think December of 1998. And in that moment, I became crystal clear of what my purpose was on this planet, what I was here to do. And I wrote in there that my purpose was to awaken the people and organizations that I work with to their possibilities. And I further extrapolated that to mean that I'm powered by possibility, but driven by results. And so I put those two things together. Now that's a broad sweeping set of words, and it could apply to anybody. But the truth is it narrowed my focus, and I ended up finding myself in a place of, I think that there's a constant need for steady education, inspiration, encouragement, and everything I've ever done since then is always channeled through that. So for me, my passion is that, where I'm lit by that internally. Everything I do goes there, and I've built mastery on it, and it's something that people want, and it has made me money. So I've found my flow in that. So I think what I would say to anybody at a young age is like process until you find that thing that lights your soul, that feels like passion, that you can be good at, and that is of value to other people. Because if it's of value to other people, it'll make you money.
Yeah, that's great. Great point. And if I can, I'll talk about two things that changed my life, especially during this phase. I look at my father. My father wanted to be an architect. He loved architectural things, but what he's really good at was putting things together. And he ended up going into a career of plumbing, because if you think about it, you got to be creative in terms of understanding the principles of plumbing. And it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle at times to put things together. And he didn't really love plumbing. Matter of fact, I think he almost hated it. But he was able to take the things that he loved, which is architectural, and put it into his practice of plumbing. And he became a great plumber, and then ultimately became a plumbing inspector. And many of the companies that he actually would have to go and inspect would go to him and say, how do I do this type of thing? Because there's some issues here that our plumbers don't know it. And he also became then what I'll call a consultant to people on how to do the job better in the code that needed to be done, so that it could be done at a high level. And I looked at that and I thought, his purpose was not to do the job great. His purpose was to provide for his family. And the means in which he did it was at the job he had. And ironically, he didn't care about being a millionaire. He cared about being at every football game. He cared to be every baseball game. And what was interesting is, to your point of the purpose, if I look at him, his life was on fire to serve my mom and to serve our family. And it really shaped me. Then I look at my life. It gave me the opportunity to now pursue a whole different thing. My life was based on transitions. During this growing phase of my life, my wife and I first off, I thought for sure I was going to be a professional coach. I was going to be coaching football somewhere, whether it be high school, college, or the professional ranks. I loved the game of football. I was pretty good at the game of football. And all of a sudden, I get this opportunity when I meet a woman of my dreams, who I've now been married 29 years. And I'm going to ask her to marry me. And my father says, If you don't start saving money, you're going to be broke. And it made me start to think that I don't have any financial intelligence in my life. Matter of fact, I don't even have, so I had to go through a transition. My mindset was like, all right, I got to learn about this thing. And it caused me to go into something that added value into teaching people about money. And what was very interesting is what I was really good at? Building teams, creating culture, leadership. I started to study and try to master leadership. And I don't think I'm a master leader, but I can surely tell you that leadership principles live very strongly in my life. But team building and camaraderie, community gathering is one of my great strengths. And being a loyal friend and showing how people can add loyal friendships across the board in meaningful ways, that became my special sauce, so to speak. And all of a sudden I became a business builder. I started taking those skills and I applied it into financial services. I've even applied it now in other businesses that I had. And to your point, finding that thing that you love to do, or at least the passion in which stirs this fire to go beyond the stage of pain, the beyond the stage of, I don't want to do that, or discipline, lack of discipline. I'm willing to be the person I'm supposed to be by doing the things that I don't want to do today so I can be that person. That's the growing phase, at least to me. Would you agree with that?
I would. Listen, it is a do or die mentality at all phases of life. And if you notice what you just said, you referenced your dad as a plumber, and it led you to a position where you were able to see yourself as an architectural team builder, very much like what your dad did inside of a building. And what I find is that every single thing, if you really sit and think about it, everything leads to some conversation around love. Because life is intellectually and spiritually and emotionally is a love versus fear equation. It's not love versus hate, it's love versus fear. And fear takes you down a path that leads you to being out of control, whereas love takes you down a path that leads you to be in control. Fear leads you to being a victim, making excuses, looking at scarcity, whereas love takes you down a path that says there's abundance, there's plenty for all. You're responsible for this. You're in control, and then you lead a life of influence. And for me, this is the at the youngest age you possibly can, that you operate with bravery, with love, with how do you add value to other human beings in every possible way you can. If you choose that path, then you will be fearless and you won't hesitate and you won't have doubts. Hesitation is death in war. And so you have to be incredibly brave and fearless to achieve your end game. And yes, you're going to get knocked. Yes, you're going to receive pain. Yes, you're going to have to do things you don't like. Yes, you're going to be discontent with your end result. But success is the stacking and culmination of failures. And if you can look at failure and say, I don't ever actually fail, I just learn, and I learn until I win, then it's a win or learn conversation. Then it's always rooted in some form of love, and you find that passion because it's making a difference in people's lives, and then you build your mastery. And in the growth phase, the younger you learn to do that, the more powerful you become over your lifetime. And then even if you're older and you're just really rethinking things, you're never too old to learn something new. I push myself into a process where I learn every single day. I listened to a new book again today for the purpose of just continuously stretching my brain and my skill set. And I think the more we do that, the more limber, the more pliable, the more elastic we are in all of life, and we're able to pivot, shift, and allow for great things to happen. So I love your story because I agree with you 100%. And I think your dad set in motion a really stable example, but it was based on what did he want to have? He wanted to be at the football games. He wasn't chasing money. His love was for his family. And so he established a lifetime based on that. And ultimately, we're all going to navigate that path in our own ways.
Yeah, that's great. And to bring some closure to the growth part, there were some things that really shaped me in my early career. First one was the books you read and the people that you meet will have the biggest shaping and design of your life. So I really started reading books. And some of the big books that changed my life was How to Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich, some of the basics. But the ones that really made a big difference was John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And when I think about that book specifically, that became like my master book, the playbook for me to run my life and growing as a leader and as a business designer. The last one was the E-Myth, was to understand how systems and companies can work so that you can be running the business, not being in the business, but you can run the business. And that shaped my life. And obviously there was a book called The 5 Love Languages that did shape how I communicate with my wife and my children. The second thing that I would say is, do not be afraid of transitioning. And I learned from my dad, he said, you make a living from 9 to 5, but you may make a fortune from 5 to 9. And it's the extra 3 or 4 hours of the things that you do that really changes your fortune. And whether it be your fortune of being a better, greater family, or a deeper relationship with your spouse, or even in a different career of financing and things of that sort, that really changed my life. And then the last thing is, go out and seek mentoring and coaching. And I had a mentor that said one of the great things for him was that he had a mentor. And he said, I was looking for mentorship in all the wrong places. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, do you know how many people that are retiring and they would love to share what they've learned to young people that are interested in becoming good, becoming of value? And I did that. And so in the growing phase, I grew the fastest when I obeyed and followed those core principles. All right, let's move on to the third phase, which is maturing. And now this is the age from 44 to 66. And this one is really interesting because I'm living in this right now, and so are you, Craig. This is us.
I'm a few steps ahead of you on that, but yes, yeah, we're living it.
But we're running the same race.
Yes, we are.
We're running the same race.
Yes, we are.
So this is where you're in the prime of your career. You're making more money than you've made in the past. You're actually what they call your peak earning years. You're empty nesters. We're both empty nesters, so to speak. Our kids are all grown. You have grandbabies. I don't have them yet. I would like them, but in due time. Not in a hurry, but
I'll talk to your kids.
That's right. But there's also now a time where you're doing a little bit more traveling. You're having a little bit more fun. You're doing the things that you'd like to do now because you have more resources to do it. But this is also the phase that I call the regret phase. You're on the back half of your life, and all of a sudden, all of the things that you've done in the past have gotten you to this point, and it's kind of a reflection point, where you could live in the past and say, man, life has dealt me this hand and I don't want to play that hand anymore. And you either go one way or the other. You either go to a victim mode, and it's real easy to just say, man, I'm trapped and I need to do this because of income or because of my reputation or blah, 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 whatever it might be, all of the different things. Or there's the other part that's saying, I can do better. I want to do better. Maybe there's another opportunity out there for me to take all the things that I learned to go do it. And the last thing I'll say about this is, this seems to be the segment of people's lives is it's the second half. So it's also kind of the level of, it's my second chance. It's a chance for me to do something different. It's a chance for me to make a bigger difference. It's a way for me to go all in. And since you're in this phase, what are the things that stand out to you with this? If you were talking to everybody here, whether they're, teachers, coaches, executives, business owners, city workers, what advice would you give at this phase based on your experience and the things that you've seen in other people's lives?
I think it is fairly similar to every phase, which is, what can you contribute to other people that is meaningful and life-giving? Because the more you spend your life contributing, the greater the legacy that you're leaving. You're not remembered for your accumulations, your big house, your big car. I mean, we know some of those things, but generally across humanity, that's not what we talk about. We talk about the legacy of learning, of influence, of inspiration that is left. And so for me, I think it comes down to what can you give away? What can you, I have a lot of intellectual property I've created through my time and space, and I give it away. I give a lot of it away. And I've had friends say, man, you should be charging for this. You should be this and that. And I could should my life away. I could say I should all day long. But the reality is I get joy out of seeing fire light up in the eyes of the people I talk to. And I'm compensated for that in a way that's meaningful to me. I still need to earn money. I still want to make a lot of money. And I see life as a little bit like a symphony. So when we talk about these 4 parts of life, it's like a symphony. And a symphony has different songs, different focus. You got your different parts, your different sections in the orchestra, and they all like individually. Sometimes their sounds are not so pleasing to the ear, but when that all pieces together, it can change the resonance of your entire being as a human, and change how you see life. Music is miraculous that way, and I think that our music, our song that's inside of us, our job is to find it and play it and optimize it and share it with people so that people remember that, because that's what people remember and are affected by. So, from a perspective standpoint, I've had a number of things that have impacted me at given points. I've had the passing of certain key people in my life, from a brother-in-law to a dad, that those are shifting points. Those are life-shifting moments, and recalibration, and a moment to make new decisions or express and find deep gratitude. I've had things where they've happened to me, and I've had things when I've happened to them. And what I've determined in life is that scientifically, the world, there's a statement that the world abhors a vacuum, meaning there's no hole or space that doesn't get filled. And when something is ripped from you, it creates a hole in you. And if you're not careful, it will be filled with just anything. But if you're careful, you'll refill it with the things that serve you and that are best for you. And the most important, most powerful moment you can, when as a mature being, is you rip and create your own holes and fill it with the stuff that actually takes you to the next level. And it's uncomfortable, but it's purposeful. And when you do that, you create a greater song, a greater energy that emits from you. And people are looking for that. People will travel millions of miles to watch people burn in their own energetic goodness, and I mean burn in the best way, right? Just like that's a reference to a quote about Reverend Wesley in the 1800s as an evangelist in upstate New York. They said that people would travel to watch him burn as he preached, and I think that what we do, we're always preaching about something. We're preaching about what we represent or what we want to share with other people. And I'm first year Gen X. Gen X began with me, and I'm come from the generation where we drank out of hoses. But when we're outside, we didn't communicate with our parents. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have ATMs. We didn't have any of the things that my grandkids are growing up with, or even my kids. And so the perspective of we're the last generation without this technology. We're the last generation that before Facebook and social media, and that's that comes with a very interesting perspective. So I think I will say that find your pure energy, find your pure drive, and find every way to give that away. The more you give it, it's been said that a great life is not about accumulation, but it's about our contribution. And I seek to contribute as much as I possibly can that anybody would want. I don't, not everything I have is of value to every person, but every person is of value to me. And if I can give them something, some nuance or some nugget or some word or some thought, or recalibrate or challenge them a little bit, and something changes as a result of that, I feel like I've delivered on the purpose that I found in 1998, which is to awaken the people and organizations that I work with to their possibilities. And if I can do that and then help them get those results, man, I feel like I'm living on purpose.
Yeah, it's really good. You mentioned something about finding of service to serve other people. And what I found in the community part, be your own CEO and be the CEO of your life.
Yes.
Is based on your ability to be able to communicate. And it's communicating in a number of forms. It's communicating to yourself, what you're communicating to yourself, what you're communicating to people around you, and that your actions are way more, they're more boisterous, they're louder, they're broader than any words that you can say, because people will watch what you do way more than they'll listen to what you say.
I agree.
And then on the other side, then you go to communicate or to connections, and that's the way how you connect your purpose to what you do and all those things. I won't go in great detail there, but community is critical, because community, there are, I have a very simple thing. There's pie makers and pie eaters. Pie eaters they always want to take and they are worried about their piece of the pie and what's going to happen and how they consume. But the pie makers are, how do I expand that pie? How do I make it better? How do I change different flavors? How can I share that with the world? And that is a power of serving in the community. And what I found in this segment of life is that I'm finding a new tribe based on my values and my purpose. And it's not isolation, it's connecting with other people. And I've met some of the most interesting people, and even just, you and I getting reconnected. Mm-hmm. The way that we interact is awesome. Mm-hmm. And what's cool is you have a whole different set of community that you've been with, mm-hmm. that now becomes my community because of you. And that's the cool part about maturing. Now, a couple of things that I've found in maturing that most people forget is if you were in the growing, you might not have been saving because you've been spending and consuming. Mm-hmm. When you're in maturing area, now you got to think about, how does my money do what I'm doing for my money?
Right.
Which means my money's got to do the work, because I'm not going to do the work. The second part of the thing that I found in the maturing phase is, now I've got to get as much as I can when I can, because I'm not going to have the opportunity to earn as much money, to save as much money, and to have as many resources today if I don't do what's right with those things for my next phase. Or I'm going to be working my next phase just as hard as I'm doing this phase. That's the financial part. Then the other part, like I was saying that you said before, is the giving part, your purpose, your community. What am I going to do? And I found in the maturing part, you're finding and refining who you are, and still in the creation mode.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, as we move into the exploring phase, as Dr. Coughlin calls it, that fourth phase, there's still a recreation. There's still a redesign.
Always.
And I before we leave the maturing piece, I want to go back to the hurts, hangups, and habits that people have. Because in the maturing phase, there is a lot of pain. I've lost loved ones, some of my closest mentors. And when you lose them, you do have holes in your life. What you fill it with that could be one of two things. And the things that are happening in your life when you leave a job or something: anger, resentment, mm-hmm. hate. This is actually the number one time that people get divorced, is in this maturing phase. When people they have empty nesters, all of a sudden you got to figure out, do you still like each other? Or was the reason why we were together was because of the kids? And now you get a chance to redesign and recreate your marriage. This is the maturing phase. Is actually now you're starting to understand the things around you, and then you get to decide who you want to be. And sometimes people forget that just because they're 44 to 66 in that third phase, that second half of life, doesn't mean the game's over.
Oh, heck no.
And talking about football, more games are won in the second half than they ever won in the first half. And so sometimes people forget that.
Most of them are won in the last few minutes.
It's very true. I'll say the prize is won in that last few minutes, for sure.
Yes.
For sure. So, that's very good. And I appreciate you sharing.
Well, this is such an important phase because it's the phase that you have a moment to stop and reflect. So when I said earlier about Wordsworth's, habits rule the unreflecting herd, my point is, don't let that happen. Stop, be disruptive to yourself. Disrupt yourself. Sit, reflect, wonder why this exists. Why are you doing this? Because when you notice the patterns of your life, that's when you can actually change those patterns. And what you just said is a matter of practicality, because you are both a pie maker and pie eater at no matter what. You're both a giver and a taker as a human being. It happens. So the question is, at that moment, just stop and look at what you're creating and what you're consuming. And you have to take a moment to get practical. Because if you really want to live out some dream purpose that makes a difference to other human beings, it's going to take some resources. It's going to take money. It's going to take your time. It's going to take your sanity. And you can't be waylaid by one or the other of those things. And now is always the time. It's always now. Actually, there is no past. There is no future. There's only now. We live in relentless, repetitive now moments all the time. Life is in fact like an hourglass, and we sit in that narrow neck of the glass, and we can look up and see that there's still sand, we hope. And we would really ideally have more sand flowing into it. But we look up and we see there's sand above us. So we know that there is a future. And we can look down and see the sand that has already passed. And we can name all of those. We know what all those moments, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever. We have names to all those granules of sand. But in the moment, we're living in that narrow neck of the glass. And each grain of sand is a now moment. And we have the opportunity to make that moment a defining moment, a defining grain of sand. And so like this conversation can be a defining moment for anybody that decides, now is my time. Now. Right. Now is my time to make a decision to do something a little different. I can reflect back on all the things I've learned from the past. I can look at all the grains of sand. I hope there's a bunch up above me, but I'm just going to appreciate and maximize and optimize every single grain of sand, every moment now that hits me from now on. And then if you'll do that, then what you're doing is you're changing the trajectory of your life, and you're going to change the value of every single moment. That means you're going to change the value of every single person from here till eternity. And that's a massive shift change. And that's what you do in the mature moments. That's in the maturing, you land on that. You recalibrate, you redefine, you reinvent. Should be the prefix that you use most predominantly in your life. I'm going to everything. Reinvent, refriend, re-energize, recalibrate, refuel, everything. Because it's easy to sit and look in discontent and look at the past and say, I'm unhappy with this, that, and the other thing. Totally fine. That's fine. The past is only for education. Extract the lessons. Don't live there, because that will depress you. Right? Don't I shoulda, coulda, woulda, because that's not life. Life is now. What are you going to do now? What have you learned from that? And what are you going to do in the present moment? And in the present moment, those are the most mature statements and mature decisions you can make. And you can do that in any phase, but especially in this third phase. This is the time to do that, recalibrate, and get on with an awesome new future.
Yeah. Wow. What a great visual picture, because it's so true. So true. And as we go into this next phase, the maturing phase, the what we call the retirement phase, the exploring phase, as Dr. Coughlin taught us, I find that the first three phases are all about this accumulation and acquiring to go into this last phase. And the way that my grandparents and even my parents looked at retirement in this exploring phase was they were going to be in the honeymoon phase. They were going to vacation. They were going to go do the things that they'd like to do. And what we're finding, especially as you're talking to financial advisors and people that are now getting into retirement age, and many of my friends their parents are there, and people in my neighborhood are now starting to get to this phase of retirement, of this exploring fourth quarter of their life, 8,000 days. Well, why is 8,000 days so important is that before, life expectancy was 69 to 73, 74. Now the likelihood of everybody that's on earth today is going to live into their 80s. So now retirement isn't just 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Retirement is a whole phase of life now. And Dr. Kaufman put it into 4 different areas. He said there's a honeymoon phase, which is the vacation phase. You retire, you got tons of free time. You can go do the things you want to do when you want to do them. You don't have a boss. You don't have any restrictions. Then you have the big decision phase of, okay, now I got to figure out what the heck I want to do. How am I going to do it? What are the things that are important to me? What gives me purpose? I got to recreate my purpose piece. And what it also means is then how am I going to interact with my family? Because now I'm the grandparent. I'm not the parent. And it's got to be around the different things of grandkids and the way that you can help be active in participating into your family. But there's also a decision phase because health now becomes one of the big restrictors of your life. And then the other big phase is how am I going to live with my finances? Because now you always hear, well, I'm on a fixed income. I hate to say this. I'm on a fixed income right now too. I mean, the money that I come on in is the only amount of income I'm going to have. Now, the only difference is acquiring debt when I'm a kid or I'm in the other first 3 phases, I have time to pay that off. I'm in the 4th phase. I don't have time to get my debt eliminated. So I can't acquire new debt. So when I understand what the fixed income means, I don't have resources the way I did back in the old days financially. And then the last piece, thinking about how do I swallow the pill of being alone? Because there's going to become at some point the people that you love, your friends, they're not going to be with you at that maybe last days. It also means that now your health is not right. So now you're not going to be able to do the things you want to do. So having said all those things about the last phase, the exploring, there's a lot of issues around this now that people have to consider. And some people that are in that phase. I know some people in this phase. How is that conversation? And what are the things that they're saying to you? And what are the things that you're saying to them? And I'm talking now, this is friend to friend. This is business owner to business owner. This might even be from hey, Craig, you've had some success in your life. And I have a situation now is how do I handle my next life of I'm no longer that person that I'm the successful business owner. I'm just a retiree.
Well, that is a perspective for a lot of people because some people set their life up on identification. They identify themselves as business owner guy, CEO woman, whatever. Like half of their or a majority of their identification is caught up in what they do. And that's problematic because that actually sets up failure in this final phase because you're no longer that. So if you're no longer that, what are you? And this is why a purpose-driven life is so much more powerful. For me, an important book, you mentioned some books before, and an important book for me that set up a kind of an organizational construct for me to live my life through was a book. It's a pretty obscure book. It's actually considered one of the 100 best business books of all time on certain lists, but it's still relatively unknown, but it's called Radical Leap by Steve Farber. And Steve's become a good friend of mine, but LEAP is an acronym for love, energy, audacity, and proof. And the whole concept is cultivate love. And he's written a subsequent book called Love is Damn Good Business, because you want people to love what you do, love who you are, love how you interact with them, not just like you. That leads to raving fans and all these other things. But cultivate love, generate energy, but particularly positive energy, because there's 2 energies, right? There are negative people in the world and they consume energy in voracious amounts. Those are the pie takers, right? But you want to be a pie maker because that is an energy creation machine and you want to generate good energy. People are seeking and pay big money to be in high energy, good energy environments, whether it's church, neighborhoods, soul cycles, it doesn't matter. That's what people do. And then the third one is inspire audacity, meaning if you are cultivating love and generating good energy, by nature, you will inspire audacious or dream state level behaviors in yourself and the people around you, your family, etc. And then the third one is provide proof, meaning do it, live it, be it, and then inspire it, drive it, account for it. And this is where, in that book, Steve had this amazing experience. He told me one time that he was writing the book, and overnight he had a dream, and he had paper and pen next to his bed, and he woke up and he wrote it. And in that book, he wrote, "Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do." Three-part wisdom, like it's a haiku of awesomeness to me. But because I stay with it all the time, it's like, do what you love, that's for me. In the service of people, that's for them. But more importantly, who love what you do. That means they're going to keep coming back and they're going to recommend what you do. So that saying that, if I'm that person, then if I have a title and I'm a business owner, I'm doing what I love in the service of people who love what I do. That means that's going to carry through whether I'm that person or not, because I'm going to take my purpose-driven life and it's going to run all the way through. And so I am working with them. My friends are now approaching, and some of them are retiring, at 55 to 65, somewhere in that range. And they're in their honeymoon phase. And I see pictures of them at the beach and golfing and all of that. And I know what's going on for them. But I'm also concerned about that because in my own family, I've had the classic story of the mailman who retired to Florida and within 2 years was gone. That was my uncle. And it's because of the identification lost, and then he was lost, and then he just faded away. That's not how you want to be. That's not the way you want to live. You want to find every way possible to add value everywhere you go. And there's many ways to do that, but it's a proactive reinvention of yourself, and it's really desiring to impact all the time. And that means keep learning so that you have more to give away. And that, I guess, my conversations that I've had with some of my friends is like, all right, so what else are you doing? You can only play so much pickleball, golf, and all of that. What else are you doing? What kind of impact are you doing? Where are you volunteering? Where are you adding value to people? What kind of courses are you participating in personally? Where are you traveling? Where's your greatest educational experiences going to be coming from? And that just keeps the flow of energy the right way for everyone, every individual.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I love the phrase of do what you love in the service of others who love what you do. It epitomizes what we talk about at the Be the CEO of Your Own Life of communication, which is, you got to do what you love, communicating, the community, or the connection, which is in the service of others. That's connecting what you do to other people who love what you do, which is community.
Right.
And I love that. I'm going to steal that, and I don't need to talk to Steve.
We will get Steve involved in this.
Sure.
He's a good man.
For sure.
You bet.
But I also realize that the CEO of Your Own Life mindset is that you are the company. As long as you're alive, you are the company.
You're the system.
You're it. And in this back end, sometimes you think, well, my life is over because of my employment or my profession.
Yeah.
But the reality is your role of your profession is you becoming a better you. Yeah. And it's more of you have now a chance to do some of the things that maybe you've always wanted to, you just didn't have the time to do it. What I find it interesting is that many people spend their whole life chasing money and they give their health for their money. And then they go into this final phase and they go, man, I wish I would have done my health different so I could live longer and do the things I want to do longer. And this is where you got to pay the fiddler, because this is where the times that the things that you've done now, you are now going to reap the full consequences of it, good and bad. But it also gives you a chance for rebirth, because medicine has totally changed, which enables people to keep their youthfulness or at least maintain where they're at longer, so that they can do the things that they like to do, and they can go out and play pickleball and play golf and things of that sort. But to your point, those after a while it gets boring. So what's the thing that you love to do? And what's the things now that you can really pursue that you love to do? Because now you don't need to make money for it. You don't have to be an enterprise person. And I found, my mother-in-law, she loves to paint. Mm-hmm. And she's a wonderful painter. She's 81 years old, still plays pickleball. By the way, she does it for exercise. She doesn't do it, and she does it as a social gathering. I can't tell you how many times that they coffee and brunch there, and they go play pickleball, or they play golf, or they play bridge, or whatever.
Yeah.
But her painting now, she was good. She's really good at it now. And she lives in a place in Florida where she paints the entranceway into where she's at. It's called Heritage Palms. I can't tell you how many pictures she's painted that people have bought, because they love the passion in which she puts into it. And she's getting better at it over and over and over again. It's just a cool way to reinvent yourself. And so as people are going into it, I love the fact that what you said is that you're always constantly growing and giving, because you are. I know for me, when I was looking for mentors, people that were in this phase, they gave the most to me. I have a man, his name is George Seymour. He's my spiritual mentor, and he's 70 plus years old, going through some health issues. But man, he shows up every time with a smile on his face, because he's able to talk about God. He's able to talk about Jesus. He's able to talk about his life experiences. And then he can see how I apply it in my life, and how his son is applying it, and his children. And it's awesome. I mean, that phase is, he's now giving way more than I could ever give him. But the interesting part is he's right dead smack in the middle, facing death, people around him that are dying. So he's taking much more, I'll call it, inventory of his life. People that, because he now knows his time is limiting, he's starting to do a lot more things that are very important to him. He's no longer doing the ancillary. And the third is that I'm honored that he actually considers me a priority for him to pour his life into me. I'll end with this last thought about this for me, is as I look at the end of this phase, I think it's really important for people to say, how can I organize my thoughts so I can pass it to the next generation? Because it's interesting. My mom and dad are getting a little bit older, and we've thought about the story of my mom and dad's life. My kids don't know it. And this is a way for us to maybe even use the modern technology to interview them and ask them questions, and have them share their childhood and the 4 phases of their life, so that my kids can see it and hear it and know that was their heritage. But more importantly, what my mom and dad went through, they might have gone through different things, but it's almost the same types of experiences that our kids are going to go through, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, economically. And I'd ask people that are in the community of trying to be the CEO of their own life, that this is, to your point, Craig, how do you grow to the next level? And it's about giving, and it's about development. And even when you're in this 4th phase, you can still develop. But the issues that you're going to face are much more serious, because there's a finality in all of them. If you don't pay attention to your finances, it has a finality of very bad endings. But if you do it the right way, it gives you much more opportunity and resources. Same thing with your health. If you don't really pay attention to your health, there's some finality to it that obviously is not the outcome that we'd like. And then the last part is our legacy of the knowledge in which we share with our next generation. If you don't share it, it dies with you. And I think those 3 things are really important during this phase.
Love that. Yeah, I love that. It got me thinking that when you said the way that people will end their lives, and then you shifted and you talked about your mom reinventing herself as a painter, that sparked encouragement in me just hearing that. My own mom has been teaching tap dance since she was a teenager.
That's awesome.
She's 87. She just hung up her tap shoes last year, but she still, organizes recitals. They go to retirement homes to people who are younger than her. And she's choreographing. She gets the music. She's a really creative woman. And I really believe that thing for her has kept her vibrant and focused, and keeps her energy and her clarity in her brain and all of that. Also, it builds community because she's got a group of women that come together for that. And then they're at their church meetings or whatever they do. And that is the way that she's not alone in a time when people of her age are not all staying around. And they're confronting serious end of life potential illnesses. We are living in a very, very interesting time because health technology is migrating into information technology. So I'll say that again. Health technology is migrating into information technology. Why is that a thing? I'm reading a book by Ray Kurzweil called Transcend. And he's a futurist, and he wrote another book called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And I caught those in a Tony Robbins book about money. He was referencing these things because Kurzweil is a disruptor of perspective and thought. And he understands very well Moore's law of information duplicating. And when information technology, our computing power in our pocket with our phone is so much greater than anything that has ever existed before. But it's going to be even more 10 years from now and 20 years from now. So if you can imagine that and health technology now doubling at that, because prior to this, all the pharmaceutical companies could do was hit or miss, try things, practice on lab rats, and then ultimately with people, and it didn't work always. But now what's happening, it's very different. So I think we're living in a time where the longer we live, the longer we're going to live, right? The more we stick around for the next 10 years, the more technology is going to be made available to us to stick around for another 20 years or 30 years. And that can be scary for people, or it could be really exciting for people. But now is a really good time to disrupt ourselves with that thought and put ourselves in a position like, well, what would I do with that information? What would I want from a money situation? Maybe I could even put money to work for me in a small amount now that'll actually get the chance to do the double game that we talk about. What do you want to have if you're 100? Let's say you're 60. What do you want to have at 130? Because that's a whole different story in mind. And that could mean that these 8,000 days that we might not be we might be in the fourth one, but it might be the fourth. It might be the fourth of 7 or 8,
right?
Which is crazy to think about. I realize, but it is kind of an interesting thing to do as an exercise. Maybe put yourself in that, and you need to CEO your life from that vantage point too. And you sometimes have to be a brutal CEO. And I call something my belief operating system. My belief operating system is what drives my behaviors and actions. And the two main components of my belief operating system, which if you listen to what I'm saying, is BOS. It's my boss, right? It's my internal boss. I'm the CEO. I'm my internal boss. My belief operating system is driven by my mindset and my attitude. And my attitude is my energy. My mindset is my fluid set of choices from a whole host of things. And I believe that we write our own play. We write our own story, our own narration. We want it to be an action story, a love story, a comedy. We don't want it to be a tragedy or a horror, right? We want it to be something that's exciting, and we write it. And our mindset and our attitude are the things that drive that. Well, what sits underneath those two things? Because we can't just say, well, I'm just going to change my mindset and just change my attitude. Yeah, that's true. You can. in a moment. But to really make it happen, to change your attitude, you have to continue to build your talents and your skills. Every time you get a new talent, every time you get a new piece of information, every time you listen to a podcast like this, it retalents you. Therefore, your attitude changes. I can't imagine somebody listening to this podcast and spending this much time listening to the two of us talk and not come away with it like with some new thought, some new idea, and that will spark goodness because this is rooted in goodness. And that will then work on the other side, the mindset. The mindset is driven by our life's conditioning, the story that we have. But here's the deal. We can rewrite the story anytime we want. We are producers of our own life story. If we have stuff in there that we don't like, we can rewrite that. We can eliminate it. We can make ourselves the hero of that story so that our mindset supports the conditioning of our life story. That's the hardest work of our lives. But if we can affect our mindset and our attitude be positive and good, then we will generate the kind of energy that will support the kind of love and audacity that we have over here that will spark the behaviors and actions that will ultimately be the results of our lives. So I believe that in whatever phase we're in, we are thinking about what do we want out of this? What's the legacy we're trying to lead? What's the one that we want to leave? What do we want to be remembered for? There are millions of books. Tuesdays with Morrie was probably the most impactful for me, where you're talking about end of life things and what's the difference? What do you want to be remembered for? You may not have to be remembered for many, many years to come, but what is that? What are your drivers? What are your practices every day that will stack up and compound to a life that you'll be proud of, your family will be proud of, and that makes a difference in the world? For me, this 8,000 days conversation is rich because it's living every single day. We have 8,000 days starts today, and it starts tomorrow, and it starts the next day. It's a continuation of 8,000 days. And I think this is a beautiful conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for spending some time with us. We've covered a lot of things.
A lot.
And quite honestly, I hope that this, for everybody that sees it, helps them rethink about these 8,000 days in these 4 quarters, so to speak, of your life. And I hope that if you're in that third period of that maturing phase and going into the exploring phase, that you'd be considerate of basically the 4 phases of that. The vacation phase, it's the feeling of loss phase, and then the trial and error, which is what you were just ending here with. Try different things, explore different things, recreate yourself, the ability that you can. And then the last part is the reinvention of, now that your life has changed because some of the people that you've been with for a long time may no longer be with you, that it gives you an opportunity to maybe reinvent those connections or that community that you're in. And we hope that this added value to you. Hopefully it made a reconsideration of some things that maybe you already know and you were thinking about going to do something different or maybe even expanding in your life. I hope that it makes you a better CEO of your own life. God's best, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. As we head into the holidays, we want to just let you know that we're grateful for you and our incredible community. Let's continue to build it.